All right, then we'll just take this cover off and we'll get this out of the way and relocate it. And as you can see now, it opens it up over here. You'll have a little more room to work down inside here, and we'll be able to see a little bit better what we're going to do. All right, so the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to jack this up, and we're going to take that wheel off the vehicle. Now that we have the wheel off, we're going to come in here, we're going to take this cover right here off, and the way we're going to do that is there's a 10mm bolt right inside here. There's another 10mm bolt here, and there's one more up over there. All right, so I'm going to take this cover off, and we'll come back. Next, we're going to take off that drive belt off the vehicle itself. Now, as you can see, or maybe you can't, the routing of the belt itself. Like I said, if you don't have a camera, and you just draw a little schematic out like that, so you know, so you have an idea of where the drive belt is going to go back on later on, or of course take a picture with your phone. All right, next thing we do is we take our 17mm socket and we put it onto that tensioner right there, and then we just lift up on it like this, and we take the drive belt off, and then we can release the tension and take this out, and then we can remove the drive belt from the vehicle as well. Okay, drive belt is then off. We'll put that on the side for now. We're going to remove this cover right here. We're going to remove these 10mm bolts right here, right here, right here, so we can gain access to the drive belt underneath here, or I should say the timing belt. All right, we will remove this motor mount right here shortly, but let's take this cover off here first. I want to see what condition that belt is in. Next, we're going to break all of these bolts here loose. They're only 10mm, so we'll just break them loose. We do, so we're going to remove that tensioner right there. Now we'll just put this off to the side. We put the bolts in the cover so that way you know where your bolts are when you need them. Okay, this belt still is probably the original one, or somebody may have changed it with the Hyundai replacement, but it still says Hyundai right on the belt itself. All right, so all right. Let's continue. We're going to remove this tensioner right here. I forgot to tell you, this bolt here for the tensioner is a 17mm, and this bolt that holds the tensioner to the engine itself is a 14mm. All right, so we're going to take that and break that loose, and we're going to take that assembly out. Now, this idler pulley or a tensioner is loosened up, but it will not come out, so we have to take the idler pulley off, and that's a 14mm. And we can just break that loose with a wrench or ratchet, whatever you have, and then we'll take out that idler pulley first, and the tensioner will slide right out as well. All right, I'm going to take it out like this. We're going to put this off to the side. We're going to put that back on, of course. And now we can take this one out, just like this. Remember the way you took it out, because there's only one way it can go back in. That little bump right there, it's got to fit into the corresponding hole on the block itself. So remember how you took it out, and we're going to put this off to the side right now. So now we have the engine supported underneath the bottom. We're going to take out this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, and this bolt, and we're going to remove this mount so we have a little bit better access inside there. You know, you heard me say this a million times, don't lose those bolts. Okay, now we'll take these out. Okay, I'll take this mount out. What we're going to do is we're going to take off this other cover back over here. Again, there's 10mm screws inside there. So I'm going to take, there's probably 4 of them in there. We're going to take all 4 of them out so we can remove this cover itself. Okay, this is going to be a little tough to film, so I'm going to point it out to you first so you can see what I'm doing. We're going to come down over here, and you see this bracket right here? We're going to remove that bolt right there so we can remove that bracket, which covers up the timing case cover. We're going to unplug these 2 plugs right here simply by pushing in on this piece right here and pulling out, and they'll come right out. And then down in the back, right over here, we're going to remove a 10mm bolt right there as well. Alright, so let me do that. Once that's apart, then we'll come right back. Okay, once all the bolts are out, then we just take our cover and lift it up and out like this. Put your other bolts inside the cover so you do not lose them. So now after that cover is out, before we do anything any further, let me get down here so you can see what I'm... That's very important that before you take the belt off, you make sure that all of your marks are lined up. What we're going to do is we're going to rotate it until the cam is actually pointing to the little notch on the top of the aluminum cover. As you can see, it's not pointing to it. It's all the way down, 180 degrees out. So we need to rotate the engine 1 complete revolution, and that will bring the 2 cams up to that little notch that you see in the covers themselves. Very important. It's got to be exactly pointing at that. I know the back one is a little difficult, but it's got to be exactly on the money. And then all the way down the very bottom on the crankshaft itself, we want to bring the timing mark on the crankshaft to line up with the 0 mark on the timing case cover before we take the crankshaft off and before we remove the timing case cover. It's a lot easier doing it now than doing it later on. Now, if your belt broke, it's no big deal. We can actually take the whole thing apart and we can turn each one of the cams and then rotate the crankshaft to bring it over to the 0 mark right here. I know it's a little difficult to see, but the 0 is right on the cover. It's the bigger mark, and the notch is right on the crankshaft itself. All right, so let's get down there. We're going to rotate the engine 180 degrees or 1 complete revolution. And of course, the way we rotate is we just put a socket onto the lower crankshaft bolt. We see our mark right here. And now we're going to rotate the engine 1 complete revolution because we're going to go right around and past that so we can bring the cams to the exact notch on the cover itself. All right, so we're just going to bring it around until it comes all the way around to that 0 position again. And you can see it's got to rotate around. See, it's all the way on the bottom. We need to rotate it 1 complete revolution on the bottom crankshaft, and that'll give us a half a revolution on the camshafts. All right, so now we're going to turn it very slow while we watch down on the bottom to bring that lower crankshaft around to that 0 position. We're going to pass it 1 time completely and bring it around the other time. The next revolution, we're going to bring it exactly to the 0 position. Once we have it lined up with the 0 position down the bottom, then we'll come up and we'll make sure our camshafts on the top are exactly pointing to the 0 as well. Slow and steady, and I always rotate it in the clockwise position, just so you know. If you just do it, don't try to do it quickly. You're going to try to do it slow because you still have compression in the engine. So nice and slow. Now that we rotate it around nice and evenly, we're going to take a look on the bottom. And you can see our mark right there is lined up with the 0 mark right there. Okay, so the crankshaft is now lined up. Let's go check our camshafts. The camshafts here, you'll notice that this mark is now lined up with that mark right there. And this mark is a little tighter to see in here. Let's open it up a little bit so you can see. The mark right there is lined up with that mark right there. Okay, so now we know that our cams are both lined up, the uppers are both lined up, and the lowers lined up. So next thing we're going to do now is we're going to take off this cover here, but before we do that, we're going to come in here with our impact, and we're going to shoot that bolt off right there. And when we shoot this off, we're going to make sure that that mark doesn't rotate. If it does, we'll have to reset it. All right, so let's get in here with the impact, and let's shoot this bolt out of here. Okay, let's shoot this out. Okay. All right, so now our bolt broke loose, but before we take it out, let's make sure that this mark here and the 2 marks up top didn't rotate. Okay, so now again, we're just going to take a screwdriver, we're going to lay it across the mark right here, and we're going to line it up, and you can see that this is exactly on the mark here that it needs to be. Let's check this one here. This is going to be difficult to do and film. Let me just check that one real quick and make sure that lines up as well. Okay, that one lines up exactly where it's supposed to as well. And of course, we'll take a peek down the bottom just to make sure that that one is lined up correctly. That one I think you can probably see. See how it's lined up down there? Maybe you can't. But it's lined up exactly on the 0 where it needs to be. Next thing we'll do is take out this bolt right here. Once you break it loose, they come out pretty easily. Okay? And we're going to take this, and we're just going to rock it back and forth. And you can see comes right off. And now we're going to remove all of these 10mm bolts that you see on this cover, and we're going to take off that cover as well. All of the bolts out the bottom right here, we're going to go up top, and we're going to take the rest of the bolts out up on the top of the cover, and then we'll pull that cover out of there. Once you have all of the bolts out, you just pull the cover out like this, and you can pull it down and away. If you try to take this out and it don't come out, don't force it. Just look around very carefully, and you may have another bolt hidden someplace up inside there, okay? If by chance your belt moves or whatever and you're not sure exactly if you're right, if you look right inside here, you'll see that little notch right there. That little notch right there lines up with the corresponding notch. Let's bring you in, see if maybe you can see a little closer. You see those 2 notches? They line up. That notch right there lines up with that notch right there. Okay, so we're going to check our marks again, and then we're going to come down, and we're going to release the tension on the tensioner, and we'll pull the drive belt out. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off this mounting bracket here that connects up to the engine itself. There's 3 bolts, one here, and then one from the bottom. All right, so let me break these loose, and we're going to take this mount here out. I want to point this out to you as well. There's a small 10mm bolt down here that you need to take out that holds everything up out of the way. So make sure you take out that 10mm too. And then we'll pull this mount here out of the way, and then we're just about ready to pull the belt off. Okay, next we're ready to take that out. We took the bolt out from the bottom already. these bolts will not come out because it'll hit into the firewall itself. So now we're just going to take this and we're going to pull this up and out, and this is where our third bolt went, right there. Okay, these bolts are the ones that when you try to pull it out, it'll hit into the frame of the vehicle and you won't be able to get it out, but you just walk it right up this way here. All right, so let's put this to the side now. Okay, I'll explain to you what we're going to do next. Now our belt is all stretched along through here. I would recommend just draw yourself a little schematic or take a picture of it so that way you know how to put it back together. All right, so next thing we're going to do now is we are making sure our marks line up here and down on the bottom on that little piece that I showed you down there as well. Okay, lines up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to take out that bolt there and that bolt there, and we're going to remove this hydraulic tensioner right here, and that will give us the access to take the drive belt off. So let me get the, looks like 12 or 13 millimeter, and we're going to pull that out. Don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but I'm going to give it a try and we'll see how it works out. What I'm doing is down on the hydraulic tensioner itself, I'm removing those two 12 millimeter bolts so we can remove the hydraulic tensioner from the vehicle. Okay, we'll put that down for a second, and then we'll take our timing belt off. I hope you can see that. But now our timing belt is loose. We can take the timing belt off the vehicle. Making sure that you don't rotate anything in the engine. Okay, and the timing belt comes out. And now we're going to compress the tensioner in the vise. We're going to take this tensioner back over to the vise. We're going to put the vise on here and on here, and we're going to slowly push this piston back down until we can put the pin back through there to hold this in place. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and we'll come right back. Now that we had this over in the vise, and we compress this piston back down into the bore here, we put our little pin inside here. And if you don't have a pin, you can use a very small drill bit as well, and you put it through so it comes through the other side. Not that far, just so it's fairly even on the other side like that. And then we'll put this back on there, but first we're going to route the fan belt in there, the drive belt in there, just to make sure that we get it exactly as we wanted it. Make sure you take your belt, stretch it, and make sure it fits. It's exactly the same size. This particular case, I know it's correct because I got this at the dealer. So this one is perfect. We're going to put this back on. So we'll dispose of our old one later on. And for now, we're just going to lay this belt back in there, and we're going to route it around as we took it off. So let's do that. I'm not sure if you're going to see this, but we're going to continue anyway. We're going to take our hydraulic tensioner, put it back up underneath here, lift this up just a little bit, just like that. Once you get the bolts in position, you do not want to get in here with the ratchet. You want to screw them in by hand. Once you have them caught by a couple of threads, at least 3/4 threads, so you can screw them in, then we're going to come in here with a ratchet. But don't tighten it up with the ratchet unless you're absolutely positive that you have the threads caught, or the bolts caught in the threads. Otherwise, you'll cross-thread them, and then you're really going to have a lot of problems. What you can do is when you're trying to get it lined up inside there, you can just lift the tensioner up and down or jiggle it around until you get the bolts to start to catch. And then, of course, you can come in here with the ratchet and you can snug it down until it's tight. Okay, so now that we have everything back in, we have our drive belt back in. We have our timing marks lined up exactly where they're supposed to be, here and in the back over there as well. We're going to come down on the bottom here. We're going to make sure that our crankshaft lines up exactly as it's supposed to. It cannot even be off one tooth, so make sure it's exactly where it belongs. Our bolts on the tensioner are now tight. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here, we're going to pull this pin to release the tension on the hydraulic tensioner. And we just take this and pull it. And you can see the tensioner is then applying tension to the drive belt. And now before we do anything, we're going to come around and we're going to check all the marks one more time just to make sure that everything lines up correctly. Now you see I put that bolt back in through here in the crankshaft because I needed to rotate this this crankshaft pulley because it moved just a little bit. So I screwed the bolt in here just to rotate it so I could line everything up again. All right, let's go check up top, make sure it's good, and then we'll put the covers back on and we'll get this job started. Okay, so let's confirm one more time. If you're not absolutely sure, check it again and again and again just to make sure. So this is our mark right here, and as you can see, it lines up exactly here. Let's take a look in the back over here. The back camshaft lines up perfectly as it's supposed to. Now, if it was off even one revolution, then you stop what you're doing, disassemble the tensioner, take it back off of the vehicle, and reinstall the timing belt again. Remember, this cannot be off, not even one tooth. One tooth is critical. It'll destroy the engine. It'll wind up bending the valves in the engine, and you'll be kicking yourself for not taking the time to make sure it's absolutely perfect. So make sure your marks are exactly on the money. There's no such thing as being off at not even a half or one tooth at all. All right, so all right, let's continue. Okay, let's take that bolt back out. Most of the time they're really not that tight when you screw it in just to rotate it just a little bit. But we'll take this bolt back out of here. We'll grab our cover and we'll put our cover back on. I'm going to put our washer back on this for later. Next we're going to take our engine mount that we took out and we're going to slide it back in place. Remember we took it out like this? So that's the way we're going to put it back in. These bolts will need to push them back this way a little bit. Okay? And then we'll bring this down here. And we're going to line it up, push the bolt back in for now, there, and here. They're not screwed in yet, we're just going to push them in to hold it in place. And now we're going to put this bolt down below to hold the bottom in place. Okay, and now that we have the bottom bolt caught in place, now we can come up and we can tighten in these bolts up top here. We're going to screw them in by hand at first, as far as we can. Don't tighten up one until you have all of them caught. You're just going to catch it by a couple of threads. And now we tightened up our 3 bolts, the one here, the one on this side here, and the one on the bottom, so that this mount now is put back onto the vehicle where it's supposed to be. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down on the bottom. We're going to put our timing case cover back on. That's the piece that goes right in here. I'm not going to bore you with this because it's fairly simple. You're just going to put your cover back in here where you previously removed it from, just like that. And then we're going to catch all of the screws inside here that hold it in place. We're just going to catch them loosely by hand for now, and then once all of them are caught, then we'll come back and we'll tighten it up, and we'll put the upper on next. Now we have that cover tight down on the bottom, the lower part of the timing case cover. We're going to put this one back on, and this one was the back one over here. We laid it out so we knew exactly which one was which, and now we're going to put this in. We're going to bring it back in the same way we took it out, and we'll snap it back up into position, and we'll get the bolts in it. Okay, now once you have all of the 5 bolts there caught, we're going to reattach the pieces that we previously removed now to hold the harnesses out of the way. So we're going to reattach them, and then we'll put this forward cover on, and we'll start to wrap it up. Now we're going to take our crankshaft pulley and put it back on, our crankshaft harmonic balancer. Put it back on, push it on as far as you can. We're going to take the bolt and screw it in by hand. Just so you know, there is torque specs on this, but we're just going to shoot it in there. We'll look up the specs, we'll torque it up, and then we'll come right back, but we're going to shoot it in for now. Okay, now we're going to look up the torque specs. We'll come back, torque this, and then we'll go back up top and finish up there. Next we grab our forward cover, and now we know on the forward cover we had 4 screw holes in it, so that's what we're going to do. Put our cover in here like this. Push it in there, and then we're going to catch all 4 of them first before we tighten anything up. Okay, so our timing case cover is on, upper and lower. They're tight, the back is tight, all of our brackets are back in place where they belong. Next thing we're going to do now is we're going to put our mount back in here, and we'll get that wrapped up. Now remember, you have your engine, still it's jacked up, so we're going to catch these bolts in here first. Okay, let me get the air gun. We're going to shoot these back down over here, and we're going to lower it down off the jack from the oil pan itself. So let me snug these down first. Now we're not going to go real tight yet, we're just going to get them close. Now we're going to go lower our jack stand down, our jack. Okay, and now we can come in here and tighten these down tight. Okay, so now our engine is now supported again. We can now take the jack out from underneath the engine totally. Now our engine is supported again by itself. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our tensioner back in and our idler pulley back in. So let's do that. What we're going to do is we're going to take our tensioner and put the tensioner back in. Now remember, this has got to go into that little tiny spot down there in the engine itself that accommodates it. So remember, we took this out. It was in the up position. That's the way we're going to put it back in. Okay, so we'll bring it down here first like this. Remember, it's in the up position, and you can feel now it's in where it belongs. It's into that little tiny spot where it's supposed to screw into in the engine itself. So now we're going to screw it in as far as we can by hand, making sure that it doesn't come out. And once you have it down as far as you can by hand, then you can come in there with your ratchet and you can tighten it down the rest of the way. Okay, nice and tight. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to go down the bottom and we're going to put our idler pulley in place as well. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. So now our tensioner is in, our idler pulley is in. Let's grab our drive belt and let's put our drive belt on. You want to make sure you measure off your drive belt against the new belt that you picked up. Make sure it's the same size. And as you can see, this one is the same size. Okay, now you got your routing right here that you wrote down, and now we're going to put the belt on the way that it came off. Now remember, that's the tensioner right down here, so that's going to be where we're going to adjust the, put the 17 millimeter wrench onto it so we can pull it to get the belt on. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to the bottom and we're going to connect it around the crankshaft first. Crankshaft and then air conditioning. Okay, and the last one we're going to get on here now is going to be the one right here on the AC. All right, so let's do that right now. I'm going to pry up on the tensioner. Okay, then we're just going to look to make sure that the belt is on the correct positions on all of the teeth down in here on the grooves, which they are. And that's it. See? Everything is on. Make sure that the belt is in the grooves right here as it belongs. Make sure it's on here all the way. It's on the idler pulley and the tensioner. And of course it's on the crankshaft. Alright, that's it. Belt is on. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our cover back on over here, and we're going to start to wrap this job up. Okay, now if we did a good job, we should be able to start this up, and it should fire right up. Now I just want to point this out to you. I am leaving that cover off by the right front wheel because I am doing an oil change on this vehicle, and that's why we're leaving that off now. All right, so let's get in it and let's fire it up.